prepare for the worst. I'm not Chicken Little, but I'm not walking around wearing rose-colored Oakleys either. It seems like we have gone from trying to revive the economy to trying to avoid a depression. In my opinion, it's time for smart people to prepare for the worst-case scenario. If the economy falls off the deep end, I think it will happen very rapidly and there will be very little time for any preparation. I would like to hear others' thoughts about how you will financially or otherwise prepare for this scenario should the dominoes continue to fall. It appears to me that we have about a 50-50 chance at this point, and that's way too close for my level of comfort. My thoughts at the moment are to drain all remaining credit sources and hold on to the cash before they cut off all lines. Separate essential bills from non-essential bills and hang on as long as possible. I've gone from fast lane thinking to survival lane thinking. I don't care about the politics of the situation. If anyone thinks that this is not a possibility, then please carry on and don't participate in this thread. If you think this is something to be concerned about, I would like to know what you think are some essential things that need to be taken care of now. I think all remaining lines of credit will be cut off very soon if things don't change immediately. I am poor but also thinking opposite of you. I am trying to pay off all my credit so that I am free and clear if all goes under. Not having to owe money gives me peace of mind. What would your strategy be after you max out all the credit? How would you pay it back? I would assume he's not talking about going out and maxing out his credit cards, but more along the lines of securing lines of credit now while they are available, home equity loans, student or auto loans if needed, etc. This would ensure that he is as liquid as possible when or if it hits the fan. As many of us are finding out right now, the credit industry has become very rough, and securing a loan even with a down payment and near-perfect credit is not a guarantee. If something doesn't happen soon, things could get a lot worse. Oh, that makes much more sense. We are looking to get into a house soon, but I think we will have to wait for a good rebound in lending. 2 plans: plan for survival, plan to profit or thrive. Survival, thrive. Just in him guessing I may have more good and bad debt than you. I'm only making that assumption based on our ages. I try to use a low level of debt to leverage myself with what little business and investments I do have. You may be used to making $4,000 a month and paying $2,500 a month in bills. Hypothetically, imagine moving $10, $20, or $50,000 a month or more through your system every month. I like having credit available in case something depression happens that causes a heart attack in the system. Honestly, I've never put any thought into this precarious situation we are in. I like to think positive and love the game of business. Thankfully, I've done my homework and can survive if need be. This whole post is based on the possibility of having a depression rather than a recession. I hope it doesn't happen, but I wouldn't rule it out. Lightning, yes, I mean credit cards, equity lines, bank loans, whatever. I'm a veteran and have access to a Patriot Express loan. I'm just wondering if this is what other people smarter than me may be doing at the moment. These things, for all I know, may be drying up as we speak. Around the world, you like your ideas. I like mobile homes right now too. My neighbors would have a cow over the chickens, but hey, if times get bad enough, you'll probably have to protect the chickens from the neighbors. Interesting thoughts. Plan for the best and the worst would be our approach, and the definitions of best and worst change constantly. So, you adjust the plan. One thing I would mention is that we had a huge amount, over $600,000 in HELOCs, and used most of it for improving our e-holdings. But the parts we didn't use were erased after we got the HELOCs. Example, got to $150,000 HELOC. Put $250,000 into the prop after we got the HELOC. but didn't use any of the HELOC. The lender of the HELOC pulled back $90,000, leaving us W or $60K. We haven't checked lately, but that could be gone, too. Moral of the story, even if you are extended the credit, if times change, that can be taken back. Russ H. I agree. W or 2 plans. Next thing in my thought process is to start thinking about what services and products will be needed in the next decade if things don't go well. Food. Sources of food. Animals, seeds, shelter. Low-income shelter. People will turn to bartering. Low-cost entertainment or escape items. Repair services. Car share services. What skills or areas of knowledge do you have that could fit into one of these needs? I'd add some things to what you've listed. Food. Sources of food. Animals, seeds and distribution. Farmers markets, pick your own, etc. Shelter. Low-income shelter, shared housing, tent cities, RV culture. Bartering or networks or accounting and appraisal of value of these trades. Low-cost entertainment or escape items. Repair services for most anything. Fix instead of replace. Transportation. How to get from A to B, best or cheapest or fastest or most efficient, etc. Russ H. I have been wondering about this lately also. The survival aspect I have no problems with. I can grow food and hunt if need be. The financial side is a bit more interesting. I feel pretty comfortable that I have great job security as a teacher. Will I be able to survive on what I make? I don't know. Lately I have been buying physical gold and silver. Unfortunately I don't have enough disposable income to buy the amount I would like. The dollar actually tanks. I want some kind of tangible asset to barter with. I would love to see bartering again over exchange of paper money. I used to barter a lot when I was in college. Personal finance, I consolidated all of my credit cards in December and cut them up. The lines of credit are still there but I haven't touched them since then. Might need to charge a tank of gas just to keep the lines open. Just bought a new or used vehicle. All 3 houses are fixed loans with one paying off in 9 years. No 401k because of teacher retirement package. Not sure how the status that invested though. Roth IRA had less than 500 in it after Cisco stock tanked a few years ago. Other than inflation killing my paycheck, we aren't sitting too bad. Texas never had the run-up in housing prices that many other states did. Our property values are pretty steady and have remained unchanged for the most part. The equity we have in our properties was not eaten up by a readjustment of values. Bartering and hunting food? Are you guys serious? In order for the dollar to collapse, it means other currencies are exploding. If you believe that will happen, all of your assets should be in commodities or overseas. There are a lot of things that can or could happen. Hedge your bets and focus on what you know. If your ability to make money depends on leveraged and or appreciating assets, it might be time to rethink things. I always look at worst case scenario as a part of life. If it never gets to the worst case, then life is good. Wow, I better build a bomb shelter. I will stock up cans of beans and Twinkies. And I better start stuffing cash under my mattress. It needs to be said we are not saying this is going to happen. I for one don't think it's going to happen, but why not ask the question? What we have here is an intellectual or investors or planning exercise. To wit, if there was a collapse of the world's financial markets, what would you do ahead of time to be in a decent spot? BTW, Andrew. The Depression in the 1930s was worldwide. When the US stock markets crashed, they did not go up everywhere else. Russ H. I've always been interested in being self-sufficient. Here are some ideas I want to do down the road. Solar energy for my house. No grid dependence, but sell power back when I'm not using it. Battery for nights and bad weather. All electric appliances. This includes a ground source heat pump for AC and heating. Electric tankless water heater. Backup wood furnace. Food provisions for 3+ months. I have also looked into homemade biodiesel under 5,000 gallon water tank. Well, my grandfather grew up during the Depression. You'll get by. Just get rid of as much debt as possible, because the bank can't take what you don't owe on. Your house. The credit cards, and car loans, but you need a place to sleep. The people who are highly leveraged will suffer the most. People will learn to be very frugal again. Fix stuff instead of buying new, saving, and growing their own vegetable gardens. My great-grandfather had some pretty good oil holdings, and was a judge, so the Depression didn't really affect him. In 1932 or 33 he bought a V16 Cadillac, and quite a large house overlooking Liss. Even though they were pretty well off, everyone felt it. My grandfather was very frugal to the day he died. Still, you can live well. My grandfather grew up sailing the very same boats at the same yacht club that I now sail at. The Depression didn't stop them. The markets they raced on Sunday. There are many people who say the Depression is coming and it's going to be even bigger than the last one. I wish they are wrong, but from what I know today about the way the markets work, it doesn't seem to look so good. When it comes to preparing for the Depression, a saying I've recently heard of suggests to stockpile food, bullets and gold. Food for basic survival, since, I suppose, it won't be as conveniently available for sale as it is now. Bullets, because of all the people who were caught unprepared resorting to robbery as they desperately try to get to food and other necessities. Gold and precious metals in general, silver being probably most practical as an alternative to the collapsing currencies. That said, I've started buying some physical silver, but it's in quite low quantities since my surpluses aren't big. However, I'm still holding off on food and bullets. I don't like guns, and I'm more likely to just buy stun guns or tasers instead of real stuff. I need to define what would be my cue to start doing that. With regards to that, I have a question regarding food stockpiling. One thing to consider is that the more you have stockpiled, the greater a target of robbery you potentially are, so it may be no better to have some land to fall back on and just produce food when necessary than to stockpile too much. Thoughts? Oh come on, guns are fun. Go buy an M14. Take a page out of the Kennedy's playbook, invest in booze. And if you do them, and the economy does not tank or we don't see a hyperinflation. Then, what are you out? What does it cost you? Have you been set back in any way? Correct. But I was addressing the value of the dollar. If the dollar collapses, meaning the value of the dollar drops, that means the value of whatever the dollar is being valued against, euro, yen, yuan, has to go up. I never said this would happen, nor do I believe it will happen. Hypothetically, say I was in Germany in the 1920s. I would have been better off converting all of my German marks into US dollars and buying stock in the US stock market before its collapse. Had I kept my life savings in German currency, I would have been completely wiped out. If one believes that the US dollar is going to collapse, which I don't, then I suggest that they follow my suggestion concerning Germany. My thoughts: people who have cash, preferably in a currency other than the USD, gold and silver, are good. Lots of deals will be found in equities and real estate in the coming years. People with high levels of debt, even good debt rental cash flowing real estate is bad in these times. Vacancy levels go up and you could end up with negative cash flow. Businesses with high debt levels will go under. I don't think we will go into a depression. Bernanke and company will print lots of money to prevent this. What allowed that to occur was I, which increased tariffs on imported goods, causing our trading partners to retaliate in kind. Less exports meant worse business conditions. To monetary contraction. Banks ran out of capital to lend while the Federal Reserve did nothing to help. Today the Fed is injecting massive amounts of liquidity into the system. The Fed raised interest rates back then, which lead to liquidity contraction. Today they are reducing rates. The likelihood of this bailout plan getting passed and eventually succeeding is pretty high. Bad assets will be taken off banks' balance sheets, allowing them to free up capital which they can lend. It will take some time, but I figure things will start returning to normal by mid-2010. If they start to print a lot of money, holding a lot of USDs is going to hurt. Yepers. I believe the technical term for that is all depends on how much inflation, or if inflation occurs while economy is slowing, called Russ H. Maybe I don't understand because I am so young, but I just don't get it. Perception is reality, so if you are planning for devastating things to happen, doesn't it become a self-fulfilling prophecy? I haven't been posting much on the threads because all I see is about doom and gloom. My business couldn't be growing any faster. I have people paying in full for our programs, some giving me 10,000 checks. I don't feel it. I don't see it. The last thing I need is to be sucked into feeling bad because I think we may or may not be going into a depression. I won't let it happen. But again, maybe that's just because I'm ignorant with my age. I haven't been through a depression, I don't understand the severity. But everything is going amazing and I will do what to make sure my life continues to grow and expand. Physically, mentally, emotionally, and financially. Ignorance is bliss, SMXB. I envy you, Steve, but at the same time I think it helps to be informed because things won't affect everyone immediately, and at the same time, or, perchance, some might not be affected at all. What are the chances of that, anyone? Here's a funny thing though. As I read the business category of I see great news from tech companies which seem to be continuing unabated with their growth interchangeably with news of the biggest US banks collapsing, being bailed out or bought out. I almost wonder. If I were totally focused on a particular purely tech-related business, I'd still feel totally like we're in the golden age. Ironically, the technology industry is in a golden age. Prices of tech are going down while quality is going up. Digital technology industry is probably in the best shape of all. So there's a sort of dichotomy going on. But I can't not to wonder though. When the financial industry is collapsing, it can't not to affect every other industry. Sooner or later tech companies will have to brace themselves. I wonder how will that look like. Here is an intriguing thought though. What if the salvation lies exactly in the technology industry? What are the chances of that? Maybe its continued boom will help stabilize the overall market despite government's harmful injections of toxic capital? It doesn't have to. In fact, looking at worst-case scenarios pretty much changed my life for the better. I lived my life in total fear when I was a kid, and was headed into spending the rest of my life that way. I wound up going into therapy when I was in college during my parents' divorce. After covering a lot of the standard therapy stuff, relationships, systems, etc., my therapist asked me to spend some time and figure out what I wanted my life to be about. What's most important to you? She asked. So I thought about that for a bit. And when I came back, I told her, I want to be happy. So we worked on that. How to be deep down in your soul happy. Turns out there were a lot of things I was not doing because I was afraid, fear was holding me back, and making my life boring or stagnant. So we started to whittle away at the fear stuff. So I would identify a fear, then figure out how to embrace it. For instance, one of my greatest fears as a kid was being buried alive. I had read a few stories, and they just scared the bejesus out of me. So I thought about it, how to confront this fear, head on. I took up spelunking, exploring wild caves. Always went or a group of experienced cavers, and always had 3 sources of light, etc. Had a blast. There is something indescribably peaceful about being underground in a cave, with no one else around. I'd sometimes let the group go on ahead so I could be there, alone, in the dark, or my demons. It was really, really cool. I did this or other things as well, and I'm doing it or money since I was taught to be afraid of money, losing money or losing everything. I've lived on pretty much nothing, no home, no car, next to no money, etc. for months. So I know what that's like, and I no longer fear it. My coping system these days, based on embracing fears, is what is the worst that can happen? If I'm afraid of something or if I'm going into a new experience or trepidation, I just ask myself, what is the worst case scenario here? And I think about it. Aside from a meteor coming out of nowhere and hitting the Earth, what, specifically, is the worst that could happen in a particular situation? Example, invest hundreds of thousands of dollars into a B&B to generate millions of dollars in assets. Worst case, I lose everything money-wise. Or I lose my health, or my life, or the life of a loved one. Now that I know what the worst case is, I examine the likelihood of it happening. What are the odds I will lose my health? My investment? Loved ones? In most cases, the odds are pretty low. And I work or my plan to improve those odds, making my success more likely, and any failures less likely. So when I talk about worst case scenarios, I'm not being gloom and doom. Quite the opposite. I'm working out the of really bad things happening, so I can rationally take those things into consideration, and deal or them, i.e., that my fears will come true. Once I have identified my demons, and see that they're not likely to happen, I can focus on making positive outcomes more likely. And I'm happy with that. Russ H. Actually, knowing you can handle the worst case scenario means you no longer have to worry about it. Worrying takes up a lot of brain cells. Geez, if worst case happens, you're going to be seeing one grumpy Kimber. My house will be full of broke-ass people. Forget a plan for fiscal survival, I'm going to need one for mental survival. Water source land to grow food and raise animals, preferably away from city centers areas, to hunt and fish. Alternative methods of transportation, weapons to protect Italy. Don't think we will go into a severe depression, but it's not a bad thing to be prepared for one. My grandparents went through the depression, but they had a farm. They said they hardly knew they were in a depression and were giving away food. Yay, I'm in the same camp as Russ, Kimber, etc. All I need is a few minutes or maybe a few days to get my worst case in order. Then, I can go about the business of creating abundance in my life.Steve. You ask why? That has been answered already several times here. I ask, why not? Why not take an extra hour or two? And extra day or two? To be prepared. Also, it is a great lesson in going through the due diligence process when you are considering the purchase of an asset, real estate or business. It is easy to put on the rose-colored glasses and believe that it is a great investment and will make you millions. But, take a little time to look at your worst case and have a plan for that too. It gives you a safety net and your banker will love it too. Should I, smiley eel, or should I, SMXD? I have come to the same realization over the last week. Think I can find a therapist to move into? LOL. You know, one thing people keep forgetting about the Great Depression was people survived. If it happened again, people would also survive. Reminds the gal with most of her net worth in the stock market. How I deal with crisis. Most of us have faced crisis at one time or another in our lives. If you haven't yet, you will eventually. Probably just means you are younger than I am. Some people are now wondering if they will be facing a financial crisis over the next few months or years. I just wanted to take a moment and share how I have dealt with crisis in the past, and how I am dealing with this potential impending financial crisis of the economy. The first crisis I faced was learning that I had cancer. Of course, with a diagnosis like that, emotions are the first thing to come to you. Well, after denial, that is. Crisis has passed. It was years ago. I am healthy. Maybe it is anger, or outrage, or a feeling of injustice. I have a very large tax bill due this month, and it is to bail out who? The base of many of these emotions can turn out to be fear. As it was with me then, my children growing up without me, and it is with me now, a tanking economy, renters that don't pay, etc. This fear could become paralyzing if you don't recognize it and do something about it. These are the steps I took then and am taking now. Then, take action. Every day. Start off the day with a focus on eliminating stress and bringing peace. Maybe this means checking on my safety net, to be sure it is still there. Maybe it means a little time in meditation and gratitude. Then, it is on to living my life and creating more abundance and opportunity. A lot of people are doing quite well. I keep hearing of many areas around the country where builders are cranking out and selling new properties. However, prudence is the key. Nothing wrong with being positive, I usually am, but you have to keep the big picture in mind. For example, I wouldn't seriously consider a big subdivision, not until people are less scared and there is a good chance of selling 30 houses in a reasonable period. But building a few cheap houses which sell, is still a safe bet. We are all builders and searchers. The speed with which we grow is by testing ourselves. Problem solving is the test and creates our wisdom. In order to problem solve, we must be able to see reality. We must see behavior as it really is, including our own. In other words, defining your house falsely as an asset because it is considered as such by the IRS, all accounting theory, by the general population, on corporate balance sheets, it is tangible, etc., etc., etc. Even though I understood cash drains and cash flow to the nth degree, had accounting and finance degrees, years as a corporate controller, financial VP, wrote an incomplete book on accounting theory, owned my own companies, and fixed up troubled companies, I never truly grasped the exact identity and truthful identity of an asset. RK's simple definition was earth-shaking, and reverberated through everything I learned even though I was by definition a success. I suspect the answer was in front of everyone's nose but they could not see it. Some even reject it when it is explained to them. Which is beyond baffling. It is a behavior problem. The tool for searching for information, a true identity, and solving problems, is the simple concept of a list put in written form. The act will disseminate fear and is the substance of all planning in its most basic form. Since behavior problems, including our own, disguise true identities and slow us down, it is necessary to study human behavior as a source of all problems. The list being a powerful technical tool will first prioritize all needed action. The above is a system of growing which builds a real base is the process that is valuable, not necessarily the acquired asset. Each stage increases our context and vision enlarged. How bad is the current behavior problem in Washington? What is the reality of the problem? How is it being distorted? How strong is the existing foundation to withstand economic tidal wave? How long has the problem been developing? What is the capacity to solve the problem? Is it too late? How does it affect the individual versus the major corporations? What are the capacity and reserves of ourselves as individuals? Are we alert and ready to act? Questions are the answer and increased clarity is preparation. The trend is downward in this economy and the question is the balance between cash flow and debt. True production to increase cash flow has been slowing and debt is rising. In the most conservative sense, if you have no debt you eliminate vulnerability. Debt is a promise. It is about credibility. Cash flow is a commodity-based concept and production-geared tangible asset conversion, which means food and shelter. This is stripped down to raw form, the ultimate substance. With production and food and shelter you can always live to see another day. Defaulting on debt will not kill you but it will kill your credibility and spirit. Do you think the government and Wall Street has any credibility? Are they trying to regain credibility overnight by borrowing from taxpayers to bail out debt promises not cured by real work? Is this a spirit drain as well? Do they think this is hidden from the rest of the world? Does the taxpayer have any say in the increasing amount of government debt? Who really has control here? Individual control is factually attained by starving the government and avoiding all taxes, and exposing the behavior problem that spends without accountability. A penalty must be paid and this enforcement is done by the individual as a last resort. You must be alert, passivity is death. Emails to lawmakers have already gone out against incurring any more debt in the bailout. One would suspect that the debt issue is really more related to the soul, whereas cash flow is more related to physical survival. Which is more important? If you lose your soul, what good is physical survival? I think the mentality for the crisis comes down to this: prepare for the worst. Work for the best. You create a big part of your own world, your own economy. Hope for the best can't hurt. Expect the most likely. The last one is because the worst is just the worst, but what's the thing you can predict as the most likely next good or bad thing to happen? Expect it and work with regards to it. And in addition to this mantra, there is also the fact that you always have a choice. Thus you're always powerful. No matter how bad things get, you always get to sit and make your next move. The only way you can lose this power is being dead. I thus developed a backup plan, a plan of defense from the worst, which makes me more resilient and immune the further I go in implementing it. I will spend a little time on days that I decide going through a separate backup todo, doing the things I can do to face off the threats. This way, the crisis is only making me stronger, not weaker. BTW. Also note that back in the 1929 Depression we didn't have the technology we have today. Times are very different. Anyway, that's what makes me feel better at least. Now back to biz. Lightning. The only way to secure a credit line right now is to pull the money out of it. Banks are running around cutting limits on both cards and HELOCs. The only way to guarantee you have the money from a credit line is to take it and hold it. I was just thinking I need to buy a few more bars this week.